In the year 1618, an aging Spanish diplomat named García de Silva y Figueroa journeyed across the rugged landscapes of Persia, in the land we now call Iran. By then, Figueroa was already 61 years old. His hair had turned gray, his body carried the weight of decades, and yet he was still far from home. 4 years earlier, he had departed Spain as the official ambassador of King Philip III. His mission was one of enormous importance. Europe was locked in a struggle for power, and Spain hoped to forge an alliance with the mighty Safavid Empire. If Persia could be persuaded to attack their common enemy, the Ottoman Empire, the balance of power across the world might change. But almost from the moment he arrived, things began to go wrong. At the court of Shah Abbas, the Persian ruler attempted to entertain his foreign guest with music, celebration, and a performance by elegant dancing women. The spectacle delighted the court, yet the elderly Spaniard remained unmoved. To the Shah, this reaction seemed amusing. According to Figueroa's own account, the ruler turned to those gathered and joked that the ambassador's lack of interest was not the result of virtue or religious devotion. Rather, he said, it was simply the consequence of old age. The court erupted into laughter. For Figueroa, the moment was humiliating. His dignity had been wounded, his diplomatic influence weakened, and before long it became clear that his mission had failed. Disappointed and discouraged, he prepared for the long journey home. Yet what began as a failed embassy would soon become something far more remarkable. As he traveled across the Persian heartland, Figueroa found himself captivated by a landscape unlike any he had ever seen. Ancient canals and underground aqueducts carried fresh water through dry valleys. Palm groves swayed beneath the sun. Orchards heavy with oranges and lemons stretched across the countryside. The Spanish traveler marveled at the fertility of the land. Some of the fruit, he wrote, rivaled the finest produce of Valencia itself. It was while crossing a broad plain known today as the Marv-Dashed Plateau that his guides suggested a detour. Ahead lay a place shrouded in mystery. The locals called it Chehel Minar, the 40 Pillars. Legends surrounded the site. Few knew who had built it. Fewer still knew how old it was. But everyone agreed on one thing: it was magnificent. As Figueroa approached, the ruins gradually emerged on the horizon. Rising above orchards and forests stood towering stone columns, their silhouettes piercing the sky. Even from a distance, they inspired awe. Crossing rivers and fertile valleys, passing villages and grazing herds, the travelers moved steadily closer. With every mile, the scale of the ruins became more apparent. What had first appeared to be isolated pillars revealed itself as the remains of an immense ancient city. Massive platforms of stone stretched across the plain. Broken columns lay scattered like fallen giants. Walls, stairways, and gateways still stood despite centuries of neglect. After resting from the journey, Figueroa could no longer resist his curiosity. He set out to explore. What he discovered exceeded every expectation. The ruins were unlike anything he had ever encountered. Enormous stone blocks had been fitted together with extraordinary precision. Staircases climbed toward elevated terraces. Colossal columns still stood upright, silent witnesses to a vanished age. In total, he counted 48 surviving pillars. Many more had collapsed, their shattered remains scattered across the landscape. Yet despite the destruction, much of the site appeared astonishingly well preserved. It was as though the builders had departed only yesterday. Climbing one of the grand stairways, Figueroa encountered a sight that left him speechless. Guarding an enormous entrance stood two gigantic creatures carved from stone. They possessed the bodies of powerful beasts, the wings of birds, and the imposing presence of divine guardians. Each seemed larger than an elephant. They had stood watch over these ruins for centuries, perhaps even millennia. Elsewhere, polished black stone reflected light like a mirror. One member of the expedition found this particularly entertaining. Figueroa's dog noticed its own reflection in the stone. Mistaking the image for a rival animal, it growled. The reflection growled back. Furious, the dog lunged forward, barking and snapping at the polished surface while the travelers burst into laughter. Yet beneath these moments of humor, Figueroa sensed something profound. He was standing among the remains of one of humanity's forgotten wonders. A lifelong student of classical history, he began comparing what he saw to the descriptions left behind by ancient Greek writers. Slowly, a realization emerged. These ruins were not merely an abandoned city. They were Persepolis, the legendary ceremonial capital of the Persian kings. Once the center of the greatest empire the world had ever known, an empire that stretched from Egypt to India, an empire that united countless peoples, languages, and cultures beneath a single rule. For nearly 2,000 years, the identity of these ruins had been obscured by myth and folklore, but Figueroa's observations would become the first accurate modern identification of Persepolis. Through his writings, the silent stones began to speak once more. They told the story of a civilization that had risen from the chaos of a collapsing world. A civilization that would build the largest empire Earth had yet seen, and a civilization whose magnificent palaces would one day be consumed by fire. This is the story of ancient Persia.